because that channel has like 3 different currents running together. There's like a lot of weird things that are happening as far as like the eddies and things like that. And if you plan it at the right time, or if the weather gets bad, like it would almost be impossible. So, for example, we had to plan a 10-day window when we thought would be the best, which was like in June. There's like a couple weeks in June and a couple weeks, I think, in July that are decent weather, because you never know, storms always pop up. And then basically we're like, all right, we're going to go these 10 days, and whatever looks, just so happened that the day after we got there was going to be the best day, and the day after that there was going to be a storm. So if I didn't leave on the day that I left, I probably wouldn't have made it.
This episode of the Smart Athlete Podcast is brought to you by Solpre, skincare for athletes. Whether you're in the gym, on the mats, on the road, or in the pool, we protect your skin so you're more comfortable in your own body. To learn more, go to solpre.com. Welcome to the Smart Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Funk. My guest today has her PhD in health and human performance. She's also a certified sports nutritionist, and maybe most importantly, but certainly most interestingly, she has a world record in stand-up paddleboard. She's the first female and has the fastest time across the Florida Straits. Welcome to the show, Victoria Burgess.
Thanks for having me.
Victoria, I gotta ask, we gotta jump right in. Stand-up paddleboard. So I'm from the Midwest, so this is not really a thing around here. But I want to know about competitive stand-up paddleboard because, you know, most of the time, I guess my exposure to stand-up paddleboard is like people posing for Instagram doing headstands and yoga on their paddleboards, which is nothing like what you're doing. So what is stand-up paddleboard competitively? Like, what are you doing? Could you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, stand-up paddleboarding, which actually yoga headstands, I can't even do those. Those are real hard on that thing. I could barely on the ground. But so stand-up paddleboarding is obviously with the big board, and you stand up and you paddle with your arms. In Florida, it kind of evolved from surfing kind of a thing. Make the boards with more volume. Some are wider than others. So it's gotten a lot of people into being able to do water sports on a board, which obviously in the Midwest is a huge thing because there's no surf there. So I'm sure you see people maybe on a lake or something out there.
Every once in a while.
Yeah. And there's many different areas of stand-up paddleboarding. Some is just recreational, where you go out and just check things out and relax. There's stand-up surfing, and then there's racing. So there's a bunch of different aspects, and some people just lay on it. You know, so there's a lot of things you can do on a stand-up paddleboard. But as far as like the racing goes, is that what you're curious about?
Yeah. Like how do we get it? Like I say, to me, it seemed almost more like a leisure activity, not a competitive activity. So I'm just curious, like how that scene grew up, or kind of what's going on.
I mean, it's more of a newer sport, so it's a more of a niche sport, kind of thing, but even more so, like skateboarding, I would say. And you don't really hear about it unless you're into it, kind of thing.
Okay.
I want to say maybe 10, 12 years old as an actual, like, real serious sport, but it's still developing. Things are changing all the time, constantly. And basically, they're trying to get it together where there's certain, I would say 5K and 10K are the usual distances. Most people start out as their first race doing like a 5K, kind of like similar thing. And then as you go more, for some reason, they don't have it split where like 5K, everybody does it, even the fastest elite. Most of the times the elite winds up having to do the longer distance races, which would be the 10K. That's how they basically have it set up. So 5K, 10K, and then it's always different. It can be an ocean race. It can be a lake race, any kind of maybe canal or any kind of waterway that you have. And of course that changes up things too because of the body of water. But yeah, you go out and race, and it's different styles. Some are laps, some are like see you in an hour and a half. And that's pretty much it as far as the sport goes. Yeah, in a nutshell.
I assume it's like set up. There's going to be buoys or some kind of guides or waypoints.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, there's buoys in every race just because you have to know where to turn. There's some that are technical races, or they're known as technical races, where they'll have it set up like in a triangle course or something where you're doing more turns and technical stuff. And then there's other races where they're like, okay, half a mile down or a mile down, you'll see a buoy, make a right-hand turn, come back, do 3 laps. Or 3 miles away is a buoy, turn around it and come back, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's some races that like to keep it close. Like we host a couple of races here in South Florida, and we have it set up to where it's a lap race, but then they do a beach run in between. So it kind of is a little more interactive with the people watching.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, there's all sorts of different styles and everything.
So I mean, I swim since I do triathlon, but otherwise I'm really I know next to nothing about water sports. One thing I'm curious about, I know, like I've seen dragon boat racing in Montreal, and they talk about, don't lazy paddle, like you're using your core to paddle, as your engine versus like just using your shoulders or your arms. I assume it's probably similar in that you're going to use your whole body to paddle a stand up, right?
Yeah, and that's what makes this sport a little bit more unique in a way, as far as it goes with like training, because it actually is a whole overall body sport. I mean, you're using your core, you're using your legs, you're using a lot of your legs, which you wouldn't think. Like half the time you're doing, like I would say probably like 80% of the time you're doing full squats for the whole time. Could be like half the squats. But and then you're using like even the stability, in your ankles and things, like just the smaller muscles that you don't even realize you're using those too. And then you do sometimes use a little bit of arms, but mostly lats for the upper body. And then arms, like the hands and stuff, are pretty much just to keep the paddle straight up. So yeah, I mean, it's basically learning how to like put your whole body weight on the shaft of your, and using that body weight to propel with the board.
Okay.
When you see people get into it, especially from the start, if they get serious and actually train with it, you see their body change like tons. It's really cool to see, actually.
So what kind of like body shape do you end up seeing from people that have been doing it for a while?
I mean, typically they get more lean because it is also a lot of cardio. You're going as fast as you can the whole time, plus doing all this other stuff. So they lose a ton of body fat usually, and they get a lot more. I would say kind of like maybe a swimmer, but with muscles.
Okay. That's it's just like you can almost, if you've been around enough sports, you can almost like look at somebody and be like, oh, like you're a swimmer, you run, like you could almost like pick out the body style, especially in triathlon. You can kind of tell what sport people have come from, or if they've been in triathlon for, triathlon kind of evens you out a little bit. Like in college, I was racing. I had like almost no upper body. Not that I have a huge upper body now. Um, Low 150s is what I weighed, and then my competitive weight now is like 165. Lately, I've been up to 170, though I'm not sure where the weight is. And I have much more upper body. Like I'm a lot more evened out. My legs aren't as big, even though speed's similar. So it's like all the time I've spent in the pool and not running as much has like kind of changed the weight distribution on my body. So it's like that's just what I was curious about. Is you can almost like pick people out. Like I didn't know if you could go to the beach and be like, all right, you stand up paddle, you only surf. Like I didn't know if you could do that.
I probably could. I don't know if it's like that easy with like the untrained eye, but
Okay.
But I mean, they typically have broader shoulders, like real strong backs. Their core is super solid and usually cut. But I mean, but then some of the kids, like the younger ones that are getting into it, since they've been doing it for a while now, some of them are like string beans and they're and everybody. But I guess that's typical of kids. They're not.
Yeah, they seem to do more with less.
Like, that kid just beat me, and she's like 15. My thighs, like the size of both her legs put together.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've experimented over the different styles of racing. Obviously, I started racing in general because that's where you start, and then because my schedule and everything, I started switching more towards like longer distances and open ocean kind of things. And the training styles are different, and I've actually seen my body change when I was training with certain things, whether it be just the shorter races or the ultra. endurance kind of stuff. So that's been interesting too.
So you grew up in Florida. You're still in Florida. You grew up there, I assume?
Yeah, since I was 5, I've lived here.
Okay. I assume just being in the water is almost culturally just everybody's at the beach all the time. Water sports are like the main thing there.
Actually, it's not. You would think it is, but that's more like California and Hawaii kind of a thing.
Okay.
The culture here is not. It's more like boating, fishing for Florida.
Okay.
We do a lot of things, but it's not like everybody in Florida. This area, especially I live in South Florida, it's very transient, so people are coming and going all the time. They're not very familiar. A lot of people are like from New York and New Jersey and that, so they don't necessarily go in the water a lot. They like to
Oh,
look at it,
okay. So
but
it's like a lot of I'll say transplants.
yeah. And I mean,
Okay.
I didn't start surfing until I was like 19. I was a land like softball soccer player. So
Hmm. Well, I mean, what made you make the change? Was it just a matter of like, okay, I'm done with high school and now what? Or
pretty much. I mean, I did triathlons right after high school for a little bit. I was going into the fire service. So I was like in fire academy and I'm like, what am I going to do? I have to train for something. So I started doing triathlons. Uh, and then I started meeting people who surfed. So I spent a lot of time at the ocean growing up, but not like, floating around in my tube or body surfing or whatever. But I wasn't like fully immersed in it until I got older.
Mhm.
Because, when you're at a high school after that, you're like, oh, like if you're an athlete in high school, you're like, now what? Unless you
Yeah,
go.
right. If you go to college, then if you're in college sports, then you do that. You can do intramurals, but yeah, it's definitely like a matter of I've seen plenty of people and even friends that they competed in high school. Friends I ran with in high school, and then they just do nothing for a while. Eventually, some of them have come back to running as we've gotten closer to 30.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of them just kind of almost end up floating around. I don't mean to make
Yeah.
a pun, just like floating around aimlessly.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating, and it's even more so as a female to get like the women athletes, especially at like I'm 35, so like anywhere from like 27 to like now like 40. They're starting families and they have all this other stuff, so you lose out on that whole time because of that too. So that's hard to get people.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have kids, it kind of sucks you
Yeah,
into I can't remember there's a comedian I really like talks about, maybe it's Bill Burr, talks about when you have kids, like you're just sucked into this bubble for 20 years and you don't see anything outside of the bubble. It's just kids. And then like you pop out and you don't even know what's going on anymore because everything's new and you've been basically missing for 20 years.
pretty much. That's what it seems. I don't know. I don't have kids, but
Right.
I got them.
Um, So I'm wondering about your world record. So in the intro, I said, and this is how you'd ask me to say it, fastest across the Florida Straits. For anybody that doesn't know, that's from Cuba to Florida. It's a 115-mile trek. Um, was it? Is that a thing? Were you inspired by like Diana Nyad who swam it a few years ago, or like where does the thought come from? Like this is something I'm gonna do.
Well, I started doing open ocean longer distance paddling in 2016. I did my first crossing in Hawaii. So I crossed the Molokai Channel. It's a 33-mile. That's actually set up as a race. It's a little different. It's got big swell and everything. And then I did another one the following year. So I started kind of going. I love the ocean, from the surfing background. I wasn't, because I worked full time and I was in school. I wasn't able to. I was at that weird stage of the racing where I was faster than most people around here, but not as fast as like the full time pros. So I was like always kind of by myself in the races, and I'm like, I gotta change this up somehow. So that's when I started like going towards the open ocean style. Um, but then as my PhD started coming to close, I was like, okay, get to Hawaii. I don't want to stop paddling because that would be really bad. So is there anything over here I can do? And then I remember Diana and I did the channel. All right, that's like 3 times longer than anything I've done, but she swam it. So if she could swim it, you can do it if you plan it right. So that's when I started looking into that area.
What kind of logistics goes into that? I mean, you're looking at like weather reports and like current changes. Like what are you doing to prep for that?
Well, the logistics was kind of a difficult part. I hired the boat captain that goes over many times. And I think he even was with Diana at one of her tries that when she went, because that channel has like three different currents running together. There's like a lot of weird things that are happening as far as like the eddies and things like that. And
Hmm.
if you plan it at the right time, or if the weather gets bad, like it would almost be impossible. So, for example, we had to plan a 10-day window when we thought would be the best, which was like in June. There's like a couple weeks in June and a couple weeks, I think, in July that are decent weather because you never know, storms always pop up. And then basically, we're like, all right, we're going to go these 10 days, and whatever looks like. Just so happened that the day after we got there was going to be the best day, and the day after that, there was going to be a storm. So if I didn't leave on the day that I left, I probably wouldn't have made it. But so we had to like kind of say, listen, we really want to stay, but I have to go. So I got there and I left the next morning. And then otherwise, I hired the captain, so he pulled like permits and things like that for me. So I didn't have to worry about that. And then the other stuff was mostly just training. But yeah, you have to pay attention, to the wind. We had to jog a little bit south when I started because of the wind direction, and then the current later would be able to pull me up easier. But if I didn't, I'd have to fight the current when I was tired. So I'd rather fight it in the beginning. So there's all sorts of that kind of logistical planning too, as far as your route.